break. Engine 341, where are you at?
Good morning. Welcome back to the channel. We are ready to talk about everything that happened to Harry in Africa and a lot of other things that are happening to him as he's coming of age. But before we get started in today's video, I just wanted to give a big thank you to everybody who subscribed. You all have just been super supportive and so many new subscribers. I am loving all the comments. Looking forward to us doing this together and reading this book together and making each other laugh. Of course, now I have to say, you guys, if you're watching the video and you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Everyone says that and it's annoying, but the truth is that in order to keep doing this, I have to know that I have an audience for it. And you guys have been really supportive so far. So if you are watching the video and you like it, please subscribe. Also consider sharing it, because here's the thing. Be the friend who sends out funny things, okay? So if you laugh today at a video, send it to a friend. Make your friends happy. Make them like you better, okay? I will now get off of my knees and stop begging for your sympathies and charities. But again, thank you so much for everybody who's been interacting with the channel. And thank you for everybody who's commented, who is entertaining everybody else in the comment section. It's hilarious. So thank you. Okay, we're ready to get back into this book. The last time we talked, Harry was at Eton. He was really struggling with the press. He really made out that it was a terrible time for him and they were aggressive. I mean, he wasn't dramatic about it or anything, you know, nothing like that, but he just wanted to let you know that the press has really caused him some problems low these many years. And way back when he got his head shaved, they were coming after him. And then when he broke his finger, they were coming after him, and they just won't leave him alone. But now school's over, it's vacation. He's gone to Africa with William, and there's two significant adults going with them. One of them is Marco, who happens to be William's personal bodyguard. Marco is like amazing. You know, he can do no wrong in Harold's eyes. And we'll talk more about him. And also this girl named Tiggy. She's like their nanny. But once again, we're going to discover that Harry has a real problem maintaining appropriate mental relationships with maternal figures. We saw it back with the matrons. Remember the matrons bathing him? That blew his mind. Well, Tiggy is another person who I think is blowing his mind. And I wish he could learn how to delineate his feelings between mother figures and women who he is attracted to. We've all heard the stories going around about who he lost his virginity to. And I think we've seen that trend coming. I mean, I think it should come as no surprise to us when we finally get to that part of the book. Anyway, don't want to spoil it, but I mean, I'm sure you all have all heard about this. So anyway, Tiggy's with them, Marco's with them. And as I said last time, I had not gotten into this whole business about what he was doing in Africa. And I had alluded to the fact that it looks like he and William are getting along. Not so. He and William are not getting along. William is still being mean to him. William still like, don't think that just because we're in another continent that I'm going to be friends with you. Back up. So Harry's all upset about that. But he loves Africa and it's really great. And then we're going to also talk about the fact that he's quite the hunter, according to his own estimation. He's quite the hunter. And we get into some strange ceremonies that I had no idea went on these hunting trips. And then we talk about, again, how much he hated the press, how bad it was, and how he's always been hounded by everybody, how his family doesn't love him, how, you know, there was one night of his whole life when he felt like he was part of the family. If only he hadn't taken it so for granted that one night, if only he'd really enjoyed it, because it was the only time he'd ever felt with it. And, you know, it's just more of the same. More of the same whining, more of the same telling things that it's like, is this true? I mean, I don't know, but you know what it sounds like to me?
Fake, 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 fake.
Anyway, so let's get into it. Like I said, we left off last time, they're in Africa. He is with Marco, who, like I said, is William's bodyguard. Marco is everything that Harry isn't, and then some. If Harry could reimagine himself, if he could have made who he was, he would have been Marco. Marco is big and brash and muscular and, you know, strong and huge personality. He can talk to anybody. Everything he does big. And he's also, you know, this flaming red hair, but he is not embarrassed by his red hair. Like Harry's always just like, I'm a ginger. That's probably why he let them shave his hair. And he doesn't want, he's like super self-conscious about it, which by the way, okay, you guys, what is the big deal with being a redhead? I mean, why are people always like, you know, look at that redheaded stepchild over there. I mean, what is it about being a redhead that people are so like a ginger? Okay, whatever. I just don't get his obsession with his red hair. It's not that big of a deal. But he, since everything's a big deal to him, of course his hair color is yet one more strike against him. But he says that Marco was like awesome. And of course, the way that he gets people to like him is to get them to laugh. And so his big thing is he's going to get Marco to laugh. He is going to find something that he can do that's just going to like make Marco just guffaw. That's how he's going to get his in. And then this part of the story, I was just like, once again, I mean, I'm sorry to continue to beat this drum, but editors, where were you when they let this part in? He goes on to tell this tangent of a story that goes nowhere, and you think it's going to go somewhere. He's like, I really wanted to make him laugh. Then he came up with a plan. And his plan was, and I just have to be like, this was your plan? There wasn't anybody to help you out with this one? And at first I was like, oh, he tells us what the plan is. And immediately I was like, I probably got that one really secret because it's such a lame plan. But he's like, I told everybody and a lot of people thought it was really funny. And I'm like, everybody was humoring you. Because his big plan was, Marco really likes puddings and sweets. And so at the nightly pudding, his big plan was to put Tabasco sauce in it. Why would that make anybody laugh? Like, if I was looking forward to my pudding and then it had been spoiled by Tabasco sauce, you better believe I wouldn't be laughing. But this is his plan. And people gave him the okay. Tiggy is all like, that sounds really good. Do that. And so he's off to the races with his, his Tabasco sauce. He goes into the cook tent and he's like, don't mind me. I'm just going to put this Tabasco sauce in Marco's pudding. And, the kitchen staff are like, okay. And he does it. So you think there's going to be some kind of reaction. You're waiting for it. I mean, we built this whole thing up. Then he goes on to say, I mean, the legs are just cut out from underneath that story. Because then he starts talking about, and then when they brought the puddings in, mysteriously a leopard walked by. Everyone was frozen. No one knew what to do about the leopard. But I started to walk towards the leopard. And then Marco grabbed my shoulder and wouldn't let me. And everyone was like, everyone was shocked. And then they were shocked because what if the leopard had eaten me? Imagine that headline. End scene. What happened to the Tabasco? Did Marco laugh? I mean, why are you telling me the story? Marco was the best. I wanted to make him laugh. I got Tabasco to put in his pudding. Leopard. I'm lost for words because I don't understand why he told that story. Anyway, but he kind of ends that story by saying, wouldn't it have been so terrible if I got mauled by a leopard because when Mummy comes out of hiding, where am I going to be? I can't be in the jaws of a leopard. So that's like, that's his first realization that he better be a little bit more careful in life because Mummy's coming back any day. And when she comes back, he needs to be alive for that. Then he starts talking about just how much he loved Africa. Africa was the best. It was so much better than, cold, frigid, sterile England. Here, this place was teeming with life and everybody was super friendly. And he goes on to talk about the fact that everyone is just really big on like physical displays of affection. Big hugs, high fives, just lots of camaraderie, which it seems like his soul really needed that and no one was giving it to him. What I really think about Harry is that he was really born to be an American and he was born in England. You know what I mean? Like, he wants to be loud and brash and like big with his emotions and therapy seems to mean a lot to him and big displays of affection and he seems like a misfit in his own culture. Like everything that he wanted isn't something that is being offered up where in the culture of the royal family. And for whatever reason, I mean, it's not like a Meghan Markle thing. It's like his whole life, it seems like he's just been disappointed with the people in his life. And in the ways that they're able to express their love for him. Probably his mom was the most affectionate person. And then as soon as she died, there was just this huge vacuum in his life and there was no physical affection. He really struggled with that. But in Africa, people would hug him and touch him and he needed that. And there's all different kinds of ways that people are loved. And some people do need physical touch more than other people. Well, he seems to be one of those people. So Africa he just felt super seen in Africa. Well, another thing that happened in Africa was that he for the first time, he killed something, like a rabbit. It was a rabbit he killed. And Tiggy, mysterious Tiggy, he took blood from the rabbit and smeared it on his face, blooding him. And it was, in his estimation, this door into manhood. Like, now he was a man. He'd been blooded by Tiggy. And so that was like a big thing for him. Africa gets finished, but it's like, when Africa's done, it's so hard for him to leave. He just felt so happy while he was there, so alive, so full of the wonders of Africa. And then it's time to go back to England, and they're continuing on. And it's not immediately clear in this section if he's talking about one long vacation he had or just a series of things he would do when he wasn't in school. And I think this is just kind of like all through his adolescence. Pa had some friends, and they would often go over and play at these people's house. And I use the word play loosely. They would go and try to kill each other at this house. Hugh and Emily have 4 boys. So they would go and they'd visit these people, and it was just all out war. So I guess when the grown-ups were talking, the kids went out back and tried to kill each other, like legit. And it would start out like with wrestling matches, which, you know, what group of boys doesn't wrestle, you know? So, I mean, it's not like, I'm not surprised by anything that I read in this passage. Well, maybe a little bit surprised at the end. Like, where it escalates, it's just like, whoa, where are the grown-ups? But they, you know, it's a lot of wrestling matches. And this is the famous passage in which he really derides William for being just an absolute coward. And he says that they were always getting into these scrapes with these other boys. And sometimes it would be like divided against bloodlines, sometimes not. Sometimes it would be him against Willy. But most of the time, it was he and Willy against this cadre of crazies. And he would have to go in and save William all the time because, you know, they'd be wailing on Willy, and then he'd be screaming for help, and then like suddenly Harry would see red, and then he'd just go in. And he talks about how he was just more than anybody could handle. I mean, the rage that blinded him. And then everyone would be screaming because, you know, get Harry off me, get Harry off me, because he was coming to kill. And he just says he never felt closer to William than in those times when he was defending William. And, you know, he'd managed to pull everybody off and give William a minute, a breather, so that William could lick his wounds and mend his bruises. And then, you know, he'd come staggering back into the game. And Harry's just over there just patting himself on the back for, I mean, it's just like, what are you talking about? Like, it's all just a great big game of fun. You're all just wrestling. It's just tooth and nail boy fun. You know what I mean? Boys are animals. And how exhilarating in some sense, you know. I mean, I think that there was like an exhilaration that came with this play fighting. It was like real and not real, and you're not really gonna hurt the person, but what if you do hurt the person? I mean, it's just boy stuff. And why can't he revel in the fun that he had as a child with this group without using it as an example of old Willy and his weakness? He says, to quote him, "I don't know how effective or skilled a fighter I was, but I always succeeded in providing enough diversion for Willy to get away. He'd check his injuries, wipe his nose, then jump back in. When the scrape finally ended for good, when we hobbled away together, I always felt such love for him, and I sensed love in return, but also some embarrassment. I was half Willy's size, half his weight. I was younger brother. He was supposed to save me, not the other way around." Okay, big whoop. Like, if you were able to save your brother in a situation, why do you have to be so self-congratulatory about it? Like, if it hadn't been for me, poor, stupid, pathetic William would have just suffered at the hands of these psychos. But thanks to me, thanks to my good sense, I was able to, you know, ride in like the hero I am and save my dim-witted brother and his weak ways. Anyway, so he talks about how things start to escalate with him and the friends over at the estate. And he says that things started going from rolling around wrestling matches to small-scale wars, and they were starting to use BB guns at close range. And at one point, he tells a story about how they were walking outside, and there's a Land Rover, inexplicably with a key in the ignition, and they say, "Hey Harold, go get in the Land Rover and drive away, and we'll shoot you with a shotgun." And they shoot him with the shotgun. He gets into the Land Rover, like speeds off, and there they are. The games are a far cry from games with sticks and stones in the backyard that you and I are accustomed to of our youth, but Anyway, they're over there with their Land Rovers and shotguns. Again, where were the adults in all of this? Then they tell about, and this was where I was like, wow, you guys, if this is true, I'm sorry that nobody bothered to teach you how to be a decent human being. But he says that on this estate, the parents were having a new home built, and they were playing war around the construction site. And one of the boys named Nick inexplicably disappeared. They didn't know where he went. And so they went looking for him. They found him at the bottom of a well. There he is, moaning at the bottom of the well on his back. Did they bother to be like, hey, we'll get you out. Hey, somebody run back. We need to get emergency services out here. No, they're like, grab the fireworks. And they light a bunch of fireworks, throw them down the well on Nick. We don't know what happened to Nick. That's the end of the story. Okay, and I'm over there being like, is Nick alive? Can he see? How much damage was done to his hearing? None of that. We don't know what happened to Nick. Poor Nick at the bottom of the well. And then he says, this was all just a precursor. It's just warming us up to the antics that William liked to get up to, the physical antics. Because now he wants to talk about the fact that he and William were always getting into physical scrapes. They always were going after each other. And he talks about how, they'd be in the back seat of the car, their dad would be driving, and they would be scuffling in the back seat to the point where Pa would pull the car over and be like, Willy, get out. You're going to back. You're going to sit with the bodyguards in the next car. And then William would be all huffy. According to Harry, he's like, Pa swerved to the side of the road and shouted at Willy to get out. Me? Why me? Pa didn't feel the need to explain. Out. Willy turned to me, furious. He felt I got away with everything. 'Cause you do get away with everything. He stepped out of the car, stomped to the backup car with all the bodyguards, strapped himself in. The convoy resumed. Now and then I peered out the back window. Behind us, I could just make out the future king of England, plotting his revenge. If we didn't know how this book ended, we would think it was all tongue-in-cheek and him being sarcastic. I'd like to believe that that's how this was written. But because I know the way that this story ends, and because we're watching it play out in front of our eyes in real time, he truly thinks that William has spent every day of his life on Earth, every breath has been taken with a plot in mind. Every minute of every day, he's been trying to undercut Harold in any means necessary. Then he talks about hunting again. So remember, he'd been blooded by Tiggy with the killing of the little rabbit. But now he's going in for the real deal. He talks about a time when he had begun stalking. And he was going to go stalk red deer. And they had a hunting guide, and the hunting guide's name was Sandy, who he says was like 1,000 years old. Proper old school, they called him. And he crept along through the heather with this guy, and he guided them, told them exactly what to do. They've been stalking this deer. They're downwind of it. They see it. They pop up. They see it. Sandy beckons to Harry. Now, go, shoot. Harry shoots, kills the deer. First shot. Now, congratulations, Harry. Good work. But then an odd ceremony takes place. So they go up to the deer. They're a little bit nervous because they want to make sure that it's actually been killed and not just wounded, and it won't rear up or run off to the woods and suffer for hours. So he was really relieved to find that the deer was actually dead. But then Sandy, in this outlandish exercise, says here, Sandy knelt before the animal, took out his gleaming knife, bled it from the neck, and slit open the belly. He motioned for me to kneel. I knelt. I thought we were going to pray. Sandy snapped at me. Closer! I knelt closer, close enough to smell Sandy's armpits. He placed a hand gently behind my neck, and now I thought he was going to hug me, congratulate me. Attaboy. Instead, he pushed my head inside the carcass. I tried to pull away, but Sandy pushed me deeper. I was shocked by his insane strength and by the infernal smell. My breakfast jumped up from my stomach. Oh, please, do not let me vomit inside a stag carcass. After a minute, I couldn't smell anything, because I couldn't breathe. My nose and mouth were full of blood and guts and a deep, upsetting warmth. Okay, Harry is on the verge of a mental breakdown almost the entire time of this entire book. He's over there, sure his mother's coming out of the darkness at any moment. He's beating people in the ground within rage. And now somebody's stuffing his face inside of a carcass. The last thing this kid needed was this experience. Then he goes to try to wipe his face off, because who among us wouldn't want to wipe our face off after that abysmal experience? And Sandy's like, no, let it dry. Let the blood and guts dry. So he lets the blood dry, and he says, as my face dried, as my stomach settled, I felt swelling pride. As my face dried, as my stomach settled, I felt swelling pride. I'd been good to that stag as I'd been taught. One shot clean through the heart. Had I merely wounded him or let him get a glimpse of us, his heart would have raced, his blood would have filled with adrenaline, his steaks and fillets would have been inedible. This blood on my face contained no adrenaline, a credit to my marksmanship. Well, a credit to your stalker who told you exactly when and where to shoot, but okay. I mean, I don't want to take his victory away from him, okay? I shouldn't say that. But at the same time, it's like constantly, let me pat myself on the back, let me pat myself on the back, let me pat myself on the back. And he, goes on a long bit about how it's okay that he was killing these animals because that's how you take care of nature. I have no contention with that. I would agree with that statement. But we're not here for the parts of the book that make sense. Let's carry on. Then he talks about the fact that sometimes, so they would go hunting on breaks. They would also go skiing on breaks. But the problem with going skiing was the fact that you had to face the wall. And he says that one time Willy just was like, I don't think so. I'm going to go kill partridges instead. And he said it was that he'd rather go hunting. But Harry knew better. Harry knew that William was just asserting his age and getting out of something they all hated to have to do. And that was to face all of the photographers and all the journalists over at the wall. And apparently what happened was, before you could go skiing, and before you could get the slopes to yourself, you had to meet with the photographers and meet with the journalists, and they'll click a bunch of pictures and ask you a bunch of questions. And, all he had to do was stand there. Paul would talk, but he just resented the whole thing. It's like, well, you are getting the slopes to yourself, so why don't you calm down and give the people what they want for like 5 seconds? I mean, what could they possibly be asking you that would just be so annoying? I mean, if I got to go skiing and have the slopes to myself, I would stand there for an hour and answer questions just for the pleasure of not having the snowboarders in my way. But anyway. So then he talks about the fact that, William got to say what he wanted to do. William got to stay back, but Harry didn't get to. Nobody cared what he thought. Once again, nobody cares, nobody cares, nobody cares. And then he has a strange passage where he says, Mummy never liked the place where we would go skiing. She hated it. She hated the wall, but also Pa had been in a pretty bad accident there one time. Now I was going, and I was enjoying it. And what would Mummy think? I just didn't know how I'd ever explain it to her when she got back. I never knew I was going to tell her that I'd enjoyed it when I knew that was the place she hated so much. Well, this is what I kind of keep thinking. If you thought your mom had abandoned you like this, and had just decided that she was going to go into hiding for her own self-preservation just because she couldn't take it anymore, quite frankly, why do you care what your mother thinks, whether you enjoy something or not? She couldn't be bothered to stick around. And I'm not saying that is, obviously it's not true. She died, poor woman. But he's over there thinking that his mom is just in hiding and is going to come out any minute. Well, it's been years now. What kind of a mom would do that? Like, maybe it's okay to stop caring what she thinks if you really think she's in hiding. Anyway, that's just, I don't understand. Oh, and then he talks about how finally he decided to tell William his secret concerns and wonderments. That, did they really just bury an empty box? But maybe she's actually in hiding. And William, and I just want to say this. It occurred to me as I was reading this, I thought, if William is this horrible tyrant who beats you down at every opportunity, who takes advantage of you at every opportunity, who's constantly plotting to undermine you and step on you and make sure you don't get any of the limelight, why would you then go to this person who has done nothing but try to make you feel small? Why would you reveal your deepest, darkest secret that you think and that you're hoping that your mother has actually just been in hiding all these years? Like, that would be a very personal thing to carry, and it just surprises me that he would bother to even speak to William about it. If William is that bad, like, I can think about people in my life who've made me feel small. Those would not be the people I'd go to and say, hey, I've been struggling with this secret thought for 2 years that is outlandish and ridiculous and conspiratorial. Let me explain it to you and let me count the ways in which this could be right. Let's talk about it. Like, I would never share those things with people who I know are going to mock me soundly. This is just so incongruent. Is William your arch nemesis? Is he always coming after you? Is he just this horrible person who tries to make you feel small all the time? Or is he someone you could talk to? It can't be both. This person cannot be somebody who is tormenting you on the regular, but then also you would reveal this deep secret that you've been holding on to for years at this point. Anyway, regardless, He says he talked to William about it, and William said, yeah, I thought about that. But she's dead, and we need to just come to grips with that reality. And Harry's like, no, but I think she really is just hiding, because she said all the time that she wishes she could go into hiding. And William's like, yeah, but Mommy wouldn't do this to us. She wouldn't just abandon us for years. And and Harry's like, yeah, I thought about that too, but she also wouldn't die. She wouldn't do that to us. So, and Willy's like, yeah, I know. Well, this is the reality. Harold will have none of it. So he's still plodding along, believing that she's going to step out any minute. Then he tells us this long story about how one time they were at one of their many retreats. They're in Scotland somewhere. He talks about getting to this one lodge, and it's a lot of times there would be people, like famous people there, but this time it was just them. And he talks about how his grandpa was out grilling the steaks, and Granny, who's the queen, was in the kitchen making salad dressing, which I just think is so lovely. Like, I just love the idea of her mixing up a big bowl of salad dressing. That just seems so normal. Anyway, so she's over there mixing the salad dressing. Grandpa's out back cooking the steaks. It's just warm and cozy. It's just lovely. It's just them. And then who should come to dinner but his gran-gran. Gran-gran is his great-grandmother. He talks about how he had always had so much respect for her. And on this particular night, she and he just seemed like they were really getting along together. And he was making her laugh, and they were having a lot of fun together. And he just wishes that he had made more of that conversation that night, because she was 101 at the time. And he just, out of his own immaturity, he admits, just didn't ask her all the things that would have been prudent to ask, and didn't gain any wisdom. But he did enjoy her company. But he enjoyed her company because she was enjoying his. And he said he doesn't really know what it was that night, but she was paying a lot of attention to him. He'd had a big growth spurt, so maybe she looked at him now more as a man. And he talks about how as soon as she came in, she said she wanted a martini. And so somebody handed her one. And then he decided to help himself to one just to see what everyone was going to think, And nobody could care less what he was doing. I mean, granted, he's like 15 years old. He's among family. Okay, have a martini. Like, this is not like some unorthodox move. Because Tiggy, by the way, that nanny, she apparently never was without her flask, and she was always letting him suck on it while she sucked on it. It's like, it's kind of like, no one's going to be shocked if you drink a little at your age with your family. I'm not advocating that people are out, slurping and slumming in the streets underage, but his big move to shock his family, why would that shock them? The 101-year-old, the first thing she asked for was a martini. So apparently drinking is not taboo in this family, no matter the age. So he's disappointed that nobody was more shocked, but Gran was a little bit more, like, she liked that he was grasping on to his burgeoning manhood and having a drink with her. And so but he makes he paints this evening in the same sort of colors that he painted his time in Africa, that it was warm and inviting, and he finally felt like he was that he wasn't on the outskirts of things, but here he was in the middle, playing a part in the whole drama of the family scene. He wasn't watching it happening, he was in, and grandmother was laughing, and Pa was looking at him, appreciating that Harry was able to make the great-grandmother so amused, and it was just this wonderful moment. And he says, though, that basically this was the one and only time that it was ever that good. How is that the only time it was good? And, something that I thought too as I was reading, he says, this was my family, in which I, for one night at least, had a distinctive role. And that role for once wasn't the naughty one. And it's like, well, you had a distinctive role because you were actually trying. You engaged your grandmother, you spoke with her, you had a drink with her. Like, if you're gonna sit on the sidelines with your arms crossed and be like, why isn't anyone including me? You won't be included. Include yourself. Like, have a little bit of initiative here. A little self-governance wouldn't hurt him. And he's like, finally somebody wasn't seeing me as the naughty one. Because you weren't acting like the naughty one. I mean, okay, you're having a drink underage, but you're with your family, nobody said no. You weren't the naughty one because you were giving of yourself for once. You were thinking, how can I be of assistance to somebody else? His grandmother walked in, he gets up quickly, he offers her his arm, he takes her to her seat, like he's being a gentleman. wow, look at the way the world works when you act decently and you aren't acting like the naughty one. As we've said in many videos before, he doesn't understand why everybody thinks that he's this way. Why does everybody think that I'm so naughty? We think that because you're acting that way. And when you act differently, we think other things about you. What a revelation. Oh, and then this is the last thing I'll say, because that's the end of our section. By the way, if you're trying to keep track of where we are, we have just read, because you know how this book is delineated into these like little tiny chapters that are half a page long. We have gotten all the way to 30. So next time we come together, which will be on Tuesday, we'll be starting on 30. So if you are listening to this or you're reading it, I mean, God forbid you do that. I'm doing it for you. Anyway, we are on chapter 30. That's where we're going to end. But one other thing I want to say, he makes this big point about Gran, and he says that she was the war queen and that she had been in London at the time of the bombings, that she had entertained Churchill, that she had lived through the brutality of the Blitz. And he had always admired her strength, and that she had come out swinging, saying, I'm not leaving England, and there's nothing anyone can do to make me leave. This is my home, and I love it. And he talks about how he had always found that so inspiring, and that, you know, he'd always felt the same way about England. And he says, she was famous for saying that no matter how bad things got, she'd never ever leave England, and people loved her for it. I loved her for it. I loved my country, and the idea of declaring you'd never leave struck me as wonderful. Well, it didn't take much to turn his heart against that concept. How can you sit there with your grandmother, this matriarch that she is, your great-grandmother, who sat in Buckingham Palace as it's being bombed multiple times, brutality littering the streets, homes in a shamble, people dying from the blasts, people running to hide out in bomb shelters, night after night after night, and she wouldn't leave. Yet, you get a little bad press about your broken finger and your world is shattered. You aren't made out of the same things as Gran. That's all I can say. You are not made out of the same cloth. I don't know what cloth they cut you out of, but it would seem, I mean, he's almost like a transplant in his own family. I mean, on the one hand, he's always like, I always felt on the outs with my family. And you wonder how much of that was a self-fulfilled prophecy. But then at the same time, it's just like these people who were magnificent raised you. What was it that you didn't get from them that would have helped you to realize that those attributes and those virtues which you so admired could have been attained also by you? Like, but what puzzle piece was not put in place so that you could attain all those virtues? Was he just spoiled rotten? Was he just left to disintegrate in his misery over his mother? Like, what happened to this person? You've got the war queen. You've got Queen Elizabeth herself as your grandmother. You've got strong men in your life. Like, what was it that you just could not comprehend? And I ultimately think that what it came down to was that no one ever took him aside and said, this title of spare can either get in your head or you can rise above it. You are not this. Let's talk about all the things you're going to accomplish, because you don't have to be the king. It's like you've been given the ticket to ride. Like this, you got the way better slot. You are just as famous, just as well liked, but you have none of the responsibilities. He has everything William has except for the actual crown. He's going to walk a few steps behind William and Kate. There's a hierarchy, he says. Yeah, okay, there's a hierarchy. But how are you going to just absolutely kill it in your role? How are you going to make everybody super impressed with who you are as a person? Instead of always waiting around for people to tell you what you should think about yourself, you tell people how they should think about you. But he never takes on that thrilling responsibility of being the one to determine what people think of him. He just continually wears the mantle that everyone hands him and then cries about it. I don't know. I mean, I was talking to a friend the other day and she said it gets better when he goes to Afghanistan and it's less whiny. We can only hope. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. Please comment. And it's just so much more fun to watch these videos and comment back and forth and talk with each other. It's the best. So I'm so looking forward to it. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. If you enjoyed this, like it, comment, subscribe, share it with somebody. If it was funny to you, it'll be funny to one of your friends, I'm sure. Thank you so much. I'll see you again on Tuesday. Bye.